what are the funniest or strangest things that have happened to you?
Well, I'm going to pass that back to you here in a minute too. But I guess strange, there's a lot. You know, we could go on and on. If you talk about the amount of years we have, I've always looked at myself and other people that we've brought in to help as we had to grow. That there's 70% of what you want to do and what you'd like somebody to do is like really good work. 20% is like brilliant, like, God, why didn't I think of that? Or like, this is like, you know, this is great. I should have thought of this before. And then 10% is like, what are you doing? This is like the stupidest thing in the world. So that's why you need a collaboration. So hopefully you weed out those 10%. But when you're starting out, it was just me and John pretty much. And then we had, you know, a couple people who were working for us in the back, but 4 or 5 people. You're doing all the functions of a big company, which is ordering the parts. I mean, we would divide our day in the 12 to 15-hour days that we would have every day, starting at 6:30 in the morning, ending at 6:30 at night, sometimes on Saturdays too. I would divide my day between ordering parts, taking orders from dealers, driving the car and picking them up myself, while John was making parts in the back. So sometimes those 10%, you know, what the hell are you doing, you know, slip through the cracks. And we did an ad early on with Modern Drummer. The first product we had, I can't even tell the story without laughing. The first product we had was the adjustable track case seat, which I actually happen to have a picture of here, which is...
I remember you saying you could make, if we could make 10 of these, we could make enough money to make 10 more.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how it started, you know.
This is not my story about the funny thing that happened, but the first time we called it, I put the ad, the Royal Throne. This was the ad before Modern Drummer in the International Musician. It was an adjustable trap case seat that adjusted up and down in height, which had never been done before, which I'll get back to that if you want in a minute, because that was an interesting story as to how that came to be unto itself. But and after I placed the ad and Freddie Gruber saw it, he was like, you got to change the name. I said, I know people think the older generation, the Royal Throne is a toilet, but I'm just thinking everybody's going to remember the name. Here's my first marketing attempt. No, you can't. So I called it the adjustable trap case seat. But in Modern Drummer, I wanted to offer this seat, this great idea, an adjustable seat that you could take the top off, you could store stuff in. For drummers, in those days, you had lightweight hardware, as we brought back again, that you could actually put into something like that and take it to your gig. The seat was hard to make a lightweight seat because you needed the stability. So this was kind of the best of both worlds. So anyway, we're going to put an ad in Modern Drummer when it comes out. Big deal. I think it's one of the very first ones. A full-page ad. So I have a friend of mine who's in the advertising business. I just said, we want to put an ad in Modern Drummer. I'm going to draw up what it is. And like if you could do the artwork, and we mail it to them like 3 months in advance. I mean, it's just, keep in mind, there's nothing, you know, digital going on in those days. It was all done through the post office. So I thought, let's have a drummer talk about it, but why just sell to drummers? Sounded like, bass players could use it, keyboard players could use it, you know, playing electric keyboard. So my mentor and dear friend in those days and teacher for years was Nick Ceroli. So I went to Nick, who was playing in a trio with Chuck Burkhofer and David Mackay, piano, bass, and drums. I said, you know, I'll make each one of them a seat, and in return, I'd like to get a quote from them as to what they thought about it. So he said, well, that'd be great. So I made him each a seat, and he said, yeah, they all loved it, and I went to gigs and saw them play, and it's getting close for the Modern Drummer thing. I said, you know, we need a quote, and what I'd like to do is cover all 3 aspects. So I said one quote could be maybe Chuck saying it's really comfortable to sit on, and maybe you could say I can store all my hardware in it, and we even put a light in it. I mean, this was like from my club years, like you're always looking for the felt that comes off your cymbal stand on the floor and the bottom, and it's like so if you had a little light, you could look in the bottom of your trap case and find things. So I thought that was really clever. We should talk about that. So as it gets closer, the guy that's putting the mark, so he's like, great, say whatever they said, just say whatever you want to say. So I put the 3 quotes together. Really comfortable. I can put all my hardware inside of it, you know, my lightweight hardware. and the light is perfect because I can find parts on a dark stage. So I send it to my friend, and he just takes the quotes and puts them with the 3 people and puts it in the magazine. So the magazine comes out, and Frank DeVito calls me, I haven't seen it yet, and said, have you seen your ad in the magazine? I said, no. He said, well, Nick Ceroli says it's comfortable to sit on, which is great. Chuck Berghofer says I can store, Nick Ceroli says I can store my parts in it. Chuck Berghofer says, comfortable to sit on. Dave Mackay says I can find parts with a light on a dark stage. Dave Mackay is blind.
Oh, no.
He's a blind piano player.
Oh, my God.
So those are the things you do that that's the 10% that you need other people involved in the company to look at to see if you're doing it right or doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Funny stories that have to do with years of playing in clubs, you can go on and on, but one wacky one was I was working for some period of time with Paul Real, who was one of the
investors, right? He was
one of the investors in DW back at the beginning. He was, as a result of me working with him, finding out I could buy Campco, I just went to work with him that night, and we both went to the union and borrowed some money. That was in the previous episode that we talked about. But at one point he said, hey, we've got a really good gig for 6 weeks at the Ontario Motor Speedway, which was, they were just building it and we're going to be the opening act. There's going to be all these Hollywood stars there, and we're going to play in the lounge there for 6 weeks, which is really great. So we get there in the middle of the year. This would have been, I think I was probably 22 or 23. And we set up, and there's guys doing painting and construction and a little bit in the kitchen and everything. So we start playing, and it's a Tuesday, and we're playing 5 nights a week, and then there's nobody there. So,
no.
So we talked to the manager person who's there, said, what's going on? He says, no, we don't open for another 4 weeks, but the owner wants to lose as much money as he can in this calendar period. Oh, so we're hiring, the full staff's going to be here, the band's going to be here, everything's going to be playing until we actually open up the beginning of our next fiscal year. I don't know how that works in a business level, but in any event, it was pretty. We worked there for a month and rehearsed, and nobody
was there.
Well, the crew and we got to know.
And that's a pretty far drive, right, Ontario? So.
It was a pretty far drive in a Volkswagen. that was my, I've told the story about my influence on Mel Lewis. You've heard me tell that one.
No, I'd love to hear that, though.
Because I was in my Volkswagen hatchback, by the way. That's how I remember that. Which every time I went out there, it would not turn off. So that was another whole issue. I had to choke the clutch. But anyways, unrelated to what we're talking about, but I say this, frivolously. I had a big influence on Mel Lewis. And everybody's like, I know this guy's nuts because he's out there. But I got a blue Volkswagen hatchback. Went to take my lesson at Nick Ceroli's. He loved it, needed a new car. He got a blue Volkswagen hatchback. Mel Lewis saw Nick's. He loved it. He got a blue Volkswagen hatchback. So basically, if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't have got a blue Volkswagen hatchback. And that's a pretty big influence you can have on him. Yeah. He couldn't have got to the gigs. I mean, all this stuff that would have happened. But the other Mel Lewis side story, which is an interesting one for a lesson, I find out from Bob Yeager, our dear friend at Pro Drum Shop, who I knew. I said, let me know when the Dream Band, which was, you've got to get the Dream Band albums. If you haven't, it's the way you're going to learn how to play a big band. They are Terry Gibbs's band. It's like one of the best bands of all time, quoting Freddie Gruber and many people. And Mel Lewis was the drummer. In any event, I'm a huge Mel Lewis fan. So I'm at Pro Drum Shop, and Bob says, hey, they're going to be rehearsing Saturday at the Union, so at 2 o'clock. So I drive into the Union, 2 o'clock Saturday, pull into the parking lot, my blue Volkswagen hatchback, 2 cars over from me, Mel Lewis pulls in his blue Volkswagen hatchback. So I get out of my car, he opens up the hatchback on the back, and he gets his trap case out and puts his bass drum on it. And I hadn't met him. I said, hey, I'm Don Lombardi, a student of Nick Ceroli's. That's Nick saw my car, and that's how you saw his. He says, oh yeah. I said, let me help you. I'll take the toms in, because they were still in there. He says, no, that's okay. So I'm thinking it's a little stuffy, I mean, am I going to run away with his floor toms and steal them, or as rack toms? So okay, so he closes it and he goes in with his trap case and his bass drum, and I go over to the pro drum shop next door. I come back over and they had started rehearsing already, and I look in, and the lesson was he's rehearsing a big band sitting on the trap case with his bass drum, one ride cymbal, and a snare drum. He didn't need his toms to rehearse the big band and kick the hell out of the band.
Yeah,
'Cause
sure.
from standing out in front hearing him rehearse, you never missed it. It's like, whoa. So there's the lesson, that lesson there, I guess. Other strange, I mean, just I sat in at a jazz club in Hollywood called Sherry's and played there for a couple of years after that with Paul Real also. This was way after Don Randy was there. He was famously there as for years and years prior to this. When I first went down for the first night, it was kind of like, have him come down and play Tuesday night, and we'll see if we like him. And playing with the bass player, and he starts out first set playing this ballad, and then he gives me a drum solo on a very slow ballad.
Oh God.
That's what I'm thinking. So I'm like, I do as much double time brushes and rolling them and everything I can. At the end of the set, I said to the bass player, I said, does he always give the drummer? He said, that's how he auditions them. He figures if you can play a solo on a ballad. I said, well, how did I do? He says, I guess it went pretty good. He seemed pretty happy. And then at the end of the night, I said, because he never really, wasn't like a camaraderie. He was a kind of a strange guy. Anyways, but a great player, by the way. We had this tune that was really fast, and I'm playing it, and all of a sudden, he's under the piano, and I keep playing with the bass player, and then a couple choruses later, he gets up and comes back in. So again, at the end of the set, I say to the bass player, what happened? And he said, that was really good. It showed that we were really getting into it. The tune is called Fear. Sometimes he gets so afraid, he hides under the piano.
What?
So I enjoyed that for the next 2 weeks, and God only know what came up next. But I guess you have to, you have to have that. I just figured this is what the great players. If you need to get into your music, I never thought I'd get into it that much. But what's this? Give me 2 strange or interesting things that happened in your career.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, this one Wednesday, I got 2 phone calls. One from Luis Gasca saying, come down to the Lion's Share, this local club in Marin County, to play with Luis Gasca. And Luis is a Latin jazz trumpet player. I think now he does like some bassy band or something. The guy, and he played with Janis Joplin and Dr. John and, during the 70s. But this was at the very beginning of the 70s. And, I was just making inroads to being kind of a session musician and, jazz guy. I may have been, just out of Godspell, that show or something. So, I guess the word was spreading about me. And then the other one was about auditioning for Azteca. And so 2 phone calls in the same day, was like, wow. So I go down there and I start to play with Luis Gasca, and Luis is like Miles. He's a burner, So I'm feeling it like this, and I'm burning with Luis, and we're going for it. And the bass player, who was I forget his name, Doug McClure or something like that. He was well-known bass player, session guy, and good reader, upright bass player. And he leans over to me as soon as the song stops, and he goes, why don't you try listening for a change? And he goes, and quit showing off. And I was and then Luis had meantime started counting over this guy's telling me this, right? And so we're into the next song, and I'm like, oh crap, what do I do? So, I just tried to do the best I could. And then when I spoke with Luis later, he said, oh, he's just pissed off because he brought the wrong amp and probably couldn't hear himself or something. So, for your kind of first gig with the cats around San Francisco, that was just like really scary. It turns out, Luis hired me. From then, I would play with him, almost every week. And he was known for not paying guys, right? And, you got to be careful with Luis, blah, blah. Okay, he always paid me. And gave me my first record date, which was with, he said, I'm using Jack DeJohnette. You're going to rehearse the band. So he had everybody hip, in San Francisco. Eddie Henderson, Joe Henderson.
Wow.
Just on and on. Julian Priester, a bass player who was with Count Basie. And I'm blanking on his name, but these were and he says, and and George Duke, I think, right? And he goes, I want you to rehearse the band because you know the songs. We've been playing them live, blah blah. Okay, and then I'm bringing Jack DeJohnette out. Can he play your drums? Yeah, I'm honored. So Jack wanted to play piano on one tune, and so I said, okay. So then I'll play the drums on this tune that Jack's going to play piano on. And it was just absolutely, I couldn't believe what was happening. And it's A Love Supreme by John Coltrane.
Oh my God.
And here's Jack DeJohnette and George Duke and all these stars, right, playing. And it's like, one take and then you're done. And I was like, it was just like they got, 3 mics. That's all you need to mic a jazz kit, right? So that was done. And it was like over before I knew it. And I was just like, oh my God, And I wished, of course, I could have played the whole thing, but then I was there able to watch Jack DeJohnette play the whole thing. And, this one night, I was living in a place half this size, half the room. And my girlfriend invited her parents over, and so they wanted to see where we lived in this tiny little place. And it was really sick because I had my practice pad drum kit, and she had her typewriter. She was a transcriber of the clerk of the courts kind of thing from the I guess it was her aunt was the stenographer, and then her aunt would make a recording, and so she would type out the verbal thing so the attorneys could read it. And that was took up our whole living room, right? And on the opposite wall was my little stereo. And so I put on K-Jazz, and I'm listening to this music, and I'm going, man, that sounds familiar or something. Who is this drummer? And it was me, and I was being played on the radio in front of her parents, which is like, how to look good in front of the parents.
No
and I didn't, I hadn't got the record yet. It didn't come out, and, I guess the radio station got an early copy. And, it sounded real good, and it was just this funny, bizarre situation where you get to look good for the parents and not recognize yourself on the radio.
And you didn't can it. It actually happened without you planning it.
Yeah, nothing,
Nothing rehearsed.
Yeah, nothing rehearsed. And then I got the damn gig with Azteca, too, whenever that was. And it turned out Victor Pantoja, one of the guys from Azteca, the conga player, was playing with Luis that night. So, I guess he was there to kind of check me out, to see how it felt. And so, give the kid a try, and blah, blah, blah. So then a day or two later, I went and auditioned for Azteca. And I went in and played like Tony Williams. I was like, everything and the kitchen sink I threw in. And they said, oh man, you sound great. You think you could lay back a little bit? Because we don't all have this kind of tunes, like maybe just a little more simple or, blah, blah. Yeah, whatever you guys want, So cool, So then I step over, and here's Eddie Henderson, who's playing trumpet with them, and he goes, look, I don't know about these bands or this audition, but I've got a gig in Torrance, and I'll pay you $400 to come down and play with Eric Gravatt, because I like 2 drummers. Now, Eric Gravatt's my hero, and all the rest of the guys he was playing with around town were like the top guys. And I'm like, oh man, this is like a dream come true. So, things like that just happen, and you never know. You just never know.
That first gig was the beginning of your networking, basically, all the guys that were there.
Yeah, so you always try and take an audition, and whatever anybody says, say yes. And then, Mel Martin, the guy who was the sax player in Azteca, he got me tons of radio jingles and sessions and little commercials and stuff, because he could read anything. And he was always like, yeah, let's do this, blah, blah. And I remember doing like a reggae thing, and I'm like, what's reggae? I never heard of it. And he goes, here, and he gives me Bob Marley and the Wailers' Burnin', which is like a seminal album. And I mean, the production, everything about it is just really great. And I'm listening to Mahavishnu and Chick Corea and all that fast stuff. And this reggae stuff is like so slow. And the bass drums on 2 and 4, you know. And I'm like, oh, God, you know. But that was, you know, was for some Sesame Street commercial. And I learned how to play reggae on the spot, you know.
First session I ever did was filling in for Colin Bailey, our dear friend. Not that I did many at all, because I didn't, because I was teaching during the day. But I was young, and I think a student of his at the time. It was at Wally Hyder's, which was a studio right next to Pro Drum Shop. So, and I'd known Wally a little bit, so I felt a little bit comfortable. But still, I stayed up all night reading everything I could. I don't know what this is going to be. I have no idea what it's going to be like when you get there. And this was at a time when everything was live, music was live all over the place. So get there, set up the drums. He comes out, me and bass player and a guitar player, says, we need about 8 bars of a bossa nova. I'm like, okay. So that's it. They needed 8 bars of a bossa nova for something that they were doing, and that's all there was to it. And I'm like, but it was 3 hour, you get paid for 3 hours, it's a union session.
Yeah.
And obviously the guys who were doing a lot of things would turn all those down because they were doing major events or what have you. But it's just interesting for young drummers today. Just think about how music, I mean, even before our time, it was really live. I mean, I Love Lucy, they recorded that theme every week in order to have it be live on the show before they decided really they could play it, and then the union came in, they could play it and then replay it again. So we're talking about, you know, days playing clubs back in the day and everything you did in order to just take a gig. Reminds me of
I'm listening to you tell about your time, and what, a 6-week gig at Sherry's, you were saying, or so, you know, 6 weeks out at.
Well, that was at PJ's. Jerry Wright was there for almost a year. I joined him the last couple of months. The owner bought another club. We were there for 3 years.
Wow.
You know, it's just you're the house band, you're the trio band. People come there.
Just a slight bit of security, you know.
It was a yearly contract. So this has been the fly on the wall, and there he is. Terry, I can't thank you enough for joining me on this. This all got started as a result of Terry having a birthday dinner, as you will hear in the previous episode. That's why he was eating and I was going over old times, and then we. But
mainly about DW and the beginnings of that and all the struggles you've gone through. You know, the one thing about your attitude, I mean, you know, aside from, well, both you and John are like some of the nicest people I have ever met.
Thank you.
And you've had some real dirty deal, you know, possibly resulting in a lawsuit kind of issues, you know, and you've always found a way to get out of it, you know, and not really go to court or you know, have these like terrible battles that one. I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is, you know, we got to sue this guy, and, you know, but then only the lawyers win, right? And you always find a way to talk with somebody and work out deals where it's okay. And in spite of you losing, you know, lots of money at times from dirty dealing. So any thoughts about that? I mean, you know, we talked about AJ before, right? And thoroughbred
music, yeah, finding that drum set.
They had, well, also too, they had a bunch of your drum sets, and then Sam Ash bought them out, and you never got paid by AJ.
Right? Yeah, you had to kind of roll with the punches, I think. But I learned at a very early age, actually in Little League, that if you make a mistake, the most important thing is to move on. You know, to do what you can to pick up the pieces. Don't get pissed off. I mean, it's just like, you know, we've got a blind guy saying that he has a flashlight on a dark stage looking for parts, so that was embarrassing enough. Fortunately, a lot of drummers didn't know who he was. Modern drummer wasn't that big in those days, but you just, you know, and you have to laugh at your. I would say John and I didn't go more than 2 days without a belly laugh over something stupid that was done. You know, usually me, but it's just like. Because you're doing so many things in the course of a day It's like you're going to mess a certain amount of them up, and you just have to go back and do that. And closing with my Little League story, which I don't think I've told, is I was 8 years old and trying out. It was a new league, Studio City Little League, trying out with the dream of getting into majors, which was pretty much 10, 11, 12, so I didn't have much of a chance. I'd be in the minor leagues for a year or two. But my brother was 10 years older than me. I played pretty good for my age. But in the trials, I'm at shortstop, and they hit me a hard grounder right under my legs through my glove. The worst thing that you can have happen, just like 101. So as soon as it did, I immediately turned around and ran running after the ball. And they're yelling at me, "Don't do that, there's somebody back there, let me hit you some more." So I blew it, no question about it. I get a call a couple days later, or a week maybe, and it's from the manager of the Braves, and it's Glenn Davis actually was his name. He was a famous football player, but his son was in Little League age and on his team. And he said, "I'm going to have you join our major league team, the Braves." And I'm like, wow. I said, I really thought I blew it when that ball went through my legs. And he said, "No, the reason I want you on the team is because of that. When it went through your legs, you immediately turned around and ran after it to fix the problem. And I want somebody with that attitude." So it was always like, your worst screw-up can be something that turns into something that can be powerful for you kind of for the rest of your life. So.
And then there was the Buddy Rich drum set, right? When you made what was it, like a 3-ply or something very thin?
Well, we made that. Yeah, this is our final story. When I talk about that 10% where you do things that are dumb, but I plead innocence. I didn't know.
I probably would have loved that bass drum.
You would have loved it. Yeah, no, it rang like a doorbell forever, like you're in the bottom of the Grand Canyon. So basically, the Camco shells were 6-ply with a 6-ply reinforcing hoop. They were always 6-ply shells, and that's what we started making with 6-ply shells. When the long story short, Buddy wants to play a DW kit, and that's because he had a point in his career where the music industry was, like in 1984. The American companies had been sold. They didn't have budgets to play a jazz drummer. They were looking at dominating the rock market and taking their budgets and putting them in different areas. Tama Pearl and Yamaha, I actually had a friend of Buddy's contact them because he was looking for who would pay him, because he would always get paid every 3 years to play between Ludwig, Slinger, and Rogers back in those days. Anyways, came back from everybody, "We're not interested in this old jazz drummer. I mean, who are you playing in front of, traveling around in your bus, all year long." So I was with him, myself and Frank DeVito at Nick Ceroli's house. When he got the news, nobody was going to pay him, and he just said, "Well, what if I take the kids' drums out," meaning me. I was the younger of everybody there. And it wasn't an endorsement deal. It was just kind of like, I'm going to go play something I have to play. I don't want to play something where people are saying they don't want to endorse me, so I'll just play something that nobody's heard of, basically, or that's new. So he said, "I'll take your drums out, get them on the bus Friday," and it's like a Tuesday or Monday. I'm like, "Which Friday?" He said, "This Friday. It's in 3 or 4 days." So I'm like, I'm not going to say no to Buddy Rich. I say, "Okay, what do you want?" Well, he gives us the sizes, and he wants the typical sizes. He wants a 26-inch bass drum. We don't have a 26-inch bass drum. He wants white marine pearl. We don't have white marine pearl. So we called Keller at the time, had them do whatever they could to air freight a bass drum to us, which they got to us Thursday. John and I stayed up all night Friday covering it with material we got from Blameyer, white marine. Got him the kit down to the bus. He's out on the road with it. My fear was he was brutal with snare drums. As everybody knows, he had a bit of a short fuse. So I thought that's going to be making him a snare drum. I didn't sleep. So turns out he loves the snare drum. Toms are great. Open floor tom. He liked that. I get a call as he takes the drum set and plays on it between traveling from LA to New York. When he's in New York, from his tour manager, and says, "Buddy would like to talk with you." And I thought, that's great. He gets on. I said, "John, I just can't get the ring out of the bass drum, so we're going to have to go back to the old Ludwig set. Let me put the tour manager back on." So I talked to him. He says, "Yeah." He said, he's never seen Buddy try and tune a drum before. He said, "We were both on the floor with 2 felts in the front, 1 in the back." He said, it was it was close, but we just couldn't get the overtone out. He doesn't like that sound out of a bass drum. He's not used to that. He's never had that before. So anyways, I said, no problem. When he gets back to LA to play the Playboy Jazz Festival in 6 months, let's make him another bass drum and we'll hit it again. They said, okay. So what do I do with the kit? I said, well, give it to Joe Casadas' music store. They're there. I didn't think of it as being a collectible, but he sold it in a day, of course. It was a kit Buddy Rich played on. It was a DW kit. I was happy to get the check. So I called Bob Yeager, and I said, yeah, you know, Buddy used the drums and during that period of time, but he said he had to switch back to his old Ludwig kit. I said, couldn't get the ring out of the bass drum. He said, what did you do? I said, well, it was a 6-ply with a 6-ply. He says, oh, no, Don, he always had 12-ply bass drums. You're never going to get the ring out of a 6-ply, 26-inch bass drum.
Yeah.
So then he had the heart attack, and I never connected with him again.
Yeah.
I mean, I did personally, but not at a business level after that. So that was a lesson hard learned.
There was a lesson.
As there are many of them that we have, and
Yeah.
we'll continue to have as we grow, and grow together also too. You've got some fun things coming up that we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Whole series of The Art of Drumming on Drum Channel that will have some newly shot videos for you, and great things that we have here on Drum Channel. There's the Lombardi Live interviews, which I'm doing, The Art of Drumming, which Terry is doing. There's always something new for you. Tuesday is at 5 o'clock. Great courses that we're putting up. Drummers that sing, Nick DiVirgilio. When I was 16, I auditioned for a band, a bass player friend of mine had me go to, which was with Nicky Sullivan. It was going to be a version of the Crickets, which Nicky played with on Ed Sullivan Show with Buddy Holly back in the day. So I show up, and there's a microphone over by the drum set. I'm like, okay. So they said, well, great, your playing is great. Let's do some 4-part harmony. I'm like, I don't sing. So I'm bringing this up because we have a great course on how to learn how to sing on Drum Channel by Nick DiVirgilio. Yeah. So he said, well, that's just some harmony stuff. So okay, let's do it, and I'm trying to sing the background a little bit, and wasn't pretty. So they went over and huddled in the corner, and I'm just thinking, no problem, this was fun, plenty of gigs out there. Come over and said, no, we'd like you to be in the band, we'll do 3-part harmony. So I dodged a bullet in that case, and that started me playing in clubs when I was a senior in high school, my last semester in high school. I was 16, 17, 18. Don't tell anybody. I don't want my grandkids to look at this now, but we all had fake IDs back in those days that said we were 21, because you had to be 21 to play in a bar, and I was the youngest of the band. They were all older than me, and it was easier to do back then because it was a piece of paper. So don't try it now. I'm not recommending that. But it was the way you know all about that, right, back in the day?
Well, I can remember falling asleep in algebra class in my sophomore year, which was at 9 o'clock in the morning, having played at this beached ferry boat, up in San Francisco. Before the Golden Gate Bridge, they used to run ferry boats, and the thing was sitting at an angle like this, and so was the stage. So I'm in there playing, and we had a blues band, and I can just remember falling asleep during algebra class, and the guy was a really nice guy, the teacher, and he was saying, what's going on? He goes, or I tell him, I was up until 3, playing with this band down in Sausalito at the Ark. That was the name of the place. So, but yeah, my big trick back then was to, do a typical fill, and then hit this crash cymbal and this crash cymbal, and in between, I do one of those,
wow.
with the stick twirl, so it was
Nice.
I was a sophomore. What are you? At sophomore, you're probably like 16 or something.
Yeah.
So,
I luckily had band at 9 o'clock also, and Mr. Allen would let me get in there like about 10 to 10 because he knew I knew what was going on. Let me sleep over as long as I'd do the orchestra gigs with him when they had to do that. So, So fun times,
Yeah.
And we encourage you to check out everything we have on Drum Channel. Nick DiVirgilio's course, in case you get into a band and you have to sing. Look at all the singing drummers we have that you don't even think of as Greg Bissonette, Abe Laborio Jr.
Yeah.
I mean,
me with Zappa, for God's
no
sakes.
question.
I didn't know I could play in 5/4 and sing "Wind Up Working in a Gas Station"
No
until
question.
it happened. Until Frank asked me to do it.
So come back, check out Drum Channel. You'll hear Terry singing "My Way" any moment. And Terry, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this little journey again. This will be our final part 2, but there'll be many more stories about the history of DW and your history as we go along. Thank you so much for watching. Join us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and we'll see you next Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's morning for you.
Yep.
Afternoon for us, though. See you then.